"Run away, please," the young woman whispered, gripping the door like she was holding her life together. I hadn't seen my son in 2 years, and his own maid was begging me not to let him see me. I didn't know then that walking inside would expose a truth so disturbing. It would change how I remembered my child forever. Before I continue, subscribe for more stories of love, betrayal, and karma, just like this one. I used to believe that silence was the loudest form of anger. 2 years without my son's voice taught me something worse. It wasn't anger at all. It was absence. A slow, careful erasing, like someone rubbing a pencil line again and again until only a faint shadow remained, easy to miss unless you were looking for it every single day. The last time we spoke, it hadn't ended with shouting. That was what confused me most. There was no door slammed, no cruel final sentence you could replay and say, that was the moment everything broke. It was quieter than that. We disagreed about something small, something that shouldn't have mattered. I don't even remember the exact words now. I remember the tone. His voice had been flat, tired, as if he was already somewhere else while I was still trying to hold the conversation together. After that, I waited for the call that never came. At first, I told myself he was busy. He had always been ambitious, always moving forward, always chasing something just out of reach. I respected that. I was proud of it. When my messages went unanswered for a week, then too I told myself this was normal. Adult children drift. They build lives that don't orbit around their parents anymore. That's how it's supposed to be. But then Thanksgiving came. I set an extra plate anyway. I cooked too much food, like I always did when he was coming home. Old habits die hard. I checked my phone more times than I want to admit, pretending I wasn't waiting for a last-minute text saying he was stuck in traffic or caught up at work. The house stayed quiet. The food went cold. That night I wrapped leftovers with shaking hands and felt foolish for hoping. Christmas was worse. Christmas had always been ours. Even when he was a teenager pretending not to care, he'd still sit with me in the early morning, half awake, sipping coffee and teasing me about how sentimental I got over ornaments and old photos. That year I stared at the tree alone. I didn't put up the one ornament he made in kindergarten. I couldn't bear to see it. I called him that day, straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. Something inside me began to shrink. I became careful with my hope, like someone walking on a cracked floor, testing each step before putting my weight down. I sent shorter texts. Neutral ones, no guilt, no pressure. Just small reminders that I existed. Hope you're well. Thinking of you. Miss you. They all floated into the same empty space. Friends tried to reassure me. They said things like, "Boys are like that, he'll come around. Give him time." I nodded and smiled and changed the subject. None of them knew what it felt like to wake up in the middle of the night, because you dreamed your child needed you, only to realize you didn't even know how to reach him anymore. The hardest part wasn't the silence itself. It was the way it made me question every memory. I replayed his childhood in my mind like an old film, searching for the moment I failed him. I wondered if I had pushed too hard, loved too tightly, expected too much, or maybe not enough. Parenting doesn't come with a clear ending, no final exam where someone tells you whether you passed or failed. You just keep going, even when the person you're doing it for walks out of frame. Sometimes I imagine running into him by accident, at a grocery store, on the street. I practiced what I'd say, how calm I'd sound, how I wouldn't accuse or beg. In those fantasies, he always looked surprised but relieved, like he'd been waiting for me to appear. We'd talk. We'd fix it. I clung to those imaginary moments like lifelines. 2 years passed like that, quietly, painfully. Then one evening my phone rang. For a second I didn't recognize the number. When I answered, there was a pause on the other end, long enough for my heart to start racing. Then I heard his voice, older, more controlled, less warmth, but unmistakably him. "Hi," he said, as if we'd spoken yesterday. I couldn't speak at first. My throat closed around all the words I'd stored up over 2 years. I felt ridiculous for reacting that way, but I couldn't help it. I gripped the phone and waited for my voice to steady. "Hi," I finally managed. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. That hurt more than I expected. Instead, he told me he'd like me to come over for dinner. That he'd moved into a new place. That it would be nice to catch up. Nice. Such a small word for something that felt enormous. I said yes immediately, afraid that if I hesitated, he'd change his mind. Only after we hung up did the doubts creep in. Why now? Why dinner? Why his place, not somewhere neutral? Questions piled up, but hope pushed them aside. Hope is stubborn like that. It doesn't care about logic. In the days leading up to the dinner, I tried not to overthink it. I told myself this was a second chance, a reset. Maybe he needed space, and now he was ready. I cleaned my house like I was expecting guests, even though no one was coming. I bought a small gift for him, something tasteful and unnecessary, because that's what parents do when they don't know how else to show love. The night before, I barely slept. My mind bounced between excitement and fear. I imagined awkward silences, forced smiles, conversations that tiptoed around the past. I imagined laughter too. I imagined us sitting across from each other, rediscovering the rhythm we used to have. I chose my clothes carefully the next day. Too formal felt wrong, too casual felt careless. I wanted to look like myself, but also like someone worthy of being invited back into his life. That thought alone made my chest ache. A parent shouldn't have to earn a place with their own child, yet there I was, adjusting my collar in the mirror, practicing a smile that wouldn't look desperate. The drive to his place felt longer than it was. I watched the city change around me, neighborhoods giving way to newer buildings, cleaner streets, quieter sidewalks. He had always aimed high. Seeing where he lived now, even from the outside, stirred a complicated mix of pride and unease. The building was tall and modern, all glass and sharp lines. It looked expensive in a way that felt deliberate, like a statement. I sat in my car for a moment before getting out, my hands resting on the steering wheel. I told myself to breathe, to remember that this was my son, the boy who used to run toward me with scraped knees and tear-streaked cheeks, convinced I could fix anything. The lobby was silent, polished to the point of feeling cold. My footsteps echoed as I walked toward the elevator. I checked the apartment number again, even though I already knew it by heart. My pulse quickened with every floor that passed. By the time the doors opened, my palms were damp. I stood in front of his door longer than I meant to. The hallway smelled faintly of cleaning products and something floral, artificial. I raised my hand to knock, then hesitated. In that pause, a strange feeling settled over me, heavy and unexplainable. Not fear exactly, more like a warning, quiet but persistent, like a whisper you can't quite hear but can't ignore either. I knocked. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I heard movement inside, footsteps. A soft sound like something being set down quickly. The door opened, but it wasn't my son standing there. It was a young woman. She wore simple clothes, an apron tied at her waist. Her hair was pulled back too tightly, and her eyes widened the second she saw me. Not with confusion, with recognition. She looked past me, down the hallway, then back at my face. Her expression shifted, tightening with something that made my stomach turn. Before I could say a word, before I could even ask who she was, she leaned closer and spoke so quietly I almost thought I imagined it. "Run away," she whispered. Her voice shook. Her hands trembled where they gripped the edge of the door. "Please," she added, barely breathing the word. "If he sees you here tonight, everything will break." I stood frozen, my heart pounding so hard it drowned out every other sound. 2 years of silence had led me to this moment, this doorway, this warning I didn't understand. All I knew was that the hope I'd carried with me suddenly felt fragile, like glass about to shatter. For a moment I couldn't move. The word runaway echoed in my head, sharp and absurd, like a line from a bad movie. I stared at the young woman standing in front of me, trying to understand what I was seeing in her face. Fear, yes, but also urgency. The kind that comes from knowing something terrible is about to happen and realizing you might still have time to stop it. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, convinced there had to be a misunderstanding. "I think you have the wrong person." Her eyes flicked past me again, down the hallway, as if she expected someone to appear at any second. When she looked back at me, her lower lip trembled. "You're his parent," she whispered. It wasn't a question. The way she said it made my chest tighten. Not with pride, but with a sudden, inexplicable sense of danger. "Yes," I replied. "I'm here for dinner. He invited me." Her grip on the door tightened. For a split second, I thought she might close it in my face. Instead, she leaned closer, lowering her voice even more. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "Not tonight. Please, if you can leave, you should leave now." I searched her face for something, anything, that would make this make sense. "Why?" I asked. "What's going on?" She swallowed hard. "I can't explain," she said quickly. "I'm not supposed to say anything. But you don't understand him anymore. He's not the same." That phrase landed heavier than I expected. He's not the same. It sounded too close to thoughts I'd tried to push away over the past 2 years. People change, I told myself. That doesn't mean they become dangerous. Still, the unease spreading through me refused to fade. "Is he home?" I asked. Her hesitation was answer enough. "He will be," she said. "Any minute." I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see my son standing at the end of the hallway watching us. The corridor was empty, quiet in that unnerving way that amplifies every small sound. My heart thudded in my ears. "Look," I said, lowering my voice instinctively, mirroring hers. "I don't know what's going on, but I'm his parent. If there's a problem, we can talk about it. I'm not going to run away from my own child." Her eyes filled with something that looked dangerously close to despair. "That's what scares me," she said. Before I could ask what she meant, she stepped back, opening the door wider. The apartment beyond her looked immaculate. Too immaculate. Everything was arranged with precision, like a showroom rather than a home. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something rich, savory. Dinner, I assumed. It should have felt welcoming. Instead, it felt staged. "If you stay," she said, "please be careful what you say." I nodded, though I didn't fully understand why. She stepped aside to let me in, closing the door softly behind me, as if trying not to make noise. The click of the lock sounded louder than it should have, final in a way that made my skin prickle. Inside, the apartment was quiet, not the comfortable quiet of someone relaxing at home, but a tense stillness like a held breath. The living room was spacious, decorated in muted colors. Grays, blacks, polished wood. No personal photos. No clutter, no signs of warmth or chaos. It was beautiful, but it felt impersonal, almost cold. "Please," she said, gesturing toward a chair near the entrance. "You can sit for a moment." "Thank you," I replied, though sitting was the last thing I felt like doing. I placed my small gift on a nearby table, suddenly self-conscious. It looked out of place, wrapped in simple paper with a neat bow, like an offering in a room that didn't believe in sentiment. She lingered near the doorway, wringing her hands. I watched her closely now, noticing details I'd missed before. The faint dark circles under her eyes. The way her shoulders stayed tense, as if braced for impact. She looked younger than I'd first thought. Too young to carry that kind of fear so naturally. "What's your name?" I asked gently. She hesitated, then shook her head. "It's better if you don't know," she said. That answer unsettled me more than anything else she'd said so far. "Do you work here?" I asked, even though the apron had already answered that question. "Yes," she said. "I take care of the apartment. Cooking, cleaning, whatever he needs." The way she emphasized whatever he needs sent a chill through me. "Does he treat you well?" I asked, surprising myself with the bluntness of the question. Her eyes dropped to the floor. The silence stretched on, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, she said, "He expects things to be done a certain way." "That doesn't answer my question," I said quietly. She looked up at me then, and for the first time, there was a flash of something sharp in her gaze. Anger, maybe, or warning. "Please," she said. "Don't ask me that, not here." I held up my hand slightly, a gesture of surrender. "All right," I said. "I'm sorry." She exhaled slowly, as if she'd been holding her breath. "I didn't mean to scare you," she added, though her voice suggested she absolutely had. When he told me you were coming, I thought maybe you'd changed your mind." "About coming?" I asked. She nodded. "About seeing him." A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "He's my son," I said. "I never stopped wanting to see him." Her expression softened, just a little. "I know," she said. "That's why I warned you." Before I could respond, she straightened suddenly, her head snapping toward the door. I followed her gaze, my stomach dropping. Footsteps, muffled but unmistakable. Someone was walking down the hallway outside, her face drained of color. "He's here," she whispered. 1,000 questions crowded my mind, but none of them made it past my lips. Instead, I stood up, my movements slow and uncertain. Part of me wanted to do exactly what she told me to do. To leave, to pretend this never happened, to protect whatever fragile piece I had left. But my feet stayed rooted to the floor. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. There was a brief pause, the kind that feels loaded with intention. Then came the sound of keys. The familiar jingle echoed through the apartment, absurdly loud in the silence. The young woman stepped back, smoothing her apron with trembling hands. Her earlier urgency was replaced by something else now, resignation perhaps. She avoided my eyes. As the key slid into the lock, a final thought crossed my mind, sharp and unwelcome. Whatever waited on the other side of that door, whatever my son had become in the 2 years we hadn't spoken, I was about to meet him as a stranger. The lock turned, and in that moment, I understood that the warning I'd been given wasn't about danger in the way I'd first imagined. It was about something deeper, something harder to escape. The door began to open. The door opened slowly, deliberately, as if whoever stood on the other side wanted to make an entrance rather than simply come home. When my son stepped inside, the first thing that struck me wasn't his face, but the way the air in the room seemed to change around him. The tension that had already been there tightened, like a string pulled too far. He looked polished. Taller than I remembered, or maybe just standing straighter. His clothes were tailored, expensive without being flashy. Everything about him suggested control. He smiled when he saw me, a practiced smile that reached his mouth but stopped short of his eyes. "You made it," he said, setting his keys down with careful precision. "I'm glad. I wouldn't miss it," I replied, forcing my voice to sound lighter than I felt. For a brief second, something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or amusement. Then it was gone, replaced by calm warmth. He stepped closer and gave me a hug. It was quick, polite, the kind of embrace you give a colleague, not the kind you give your parent after 2 years of silence. Still, I leaned into it longer than he did, breathing him in, searching for something familiar. There was nothing. "Come," he said, gesturing toward the dining area. "Dinner's almost ready." The maid, no, the young woman, moved immediately, as if responding to an unspoken command. She avoided my eyes, her movements efficient and quiet. I watched her closely now, noticing how she stayed just far enough away from him, how she never turned her back for too long. We sat at a large dining table, its surface gleaming under soft, recessed lighting. The plates were arranged perfectly. Everything was symmetrical. I couldn't help thinking how different it was from the dinners we used to have, where plates rarely matched and conversations spilled over each other. He took his seat at the head of the table. I sat where he indicated, not beside him but across. The placement felt intentional. "How have you been?" he asked, pouring water into my glass. I hesitated. It felt like a loaded question. "I've been all right," I said carefully. "Better now that I'm here?" He nodded, as if that response pleased him. "Good," he said. "I hoped you'd say that." The maid placed the first dish on the table, her hands steady despite the tension radiating from her posture. He barely acknowledged her, just gave a slight nod when she finished. "You've done well for yourself," I said, glancing around the apartment. "This place is impressive." "It should be," he replied. "I worked hard for it." There was no modesty in his tone, no warmth either. Just fact. "I'm proud of you," I said, meaning it. He looked at me then, really looked at me, as if assessing the truth of my words. "Are you?" he asked. "Yes," I said without hesitation. He smiled again, that same controlled curve of the lips. I wondered. Dinner began quietly. The food was excellent, rich, carefully prepared, but I barely tasted it. Every bite felt like a test, every pause in conversation an opportunity to say the wrong thing. He guided the discussion with ease, asking surface, level questions about my life, my health, my routine. He listened politely, but his attention felt distant, like he was filing the information away rather than truly engaging with it. When I asked about his work, his eyes lit up. Not with joy, but with intensity. He spoke about success, about competition, about how people either adapt or fall behind. His words were sharp, precise, and unsettling in their certainty. "People like to think life is fair," he said, cutting into his food with exacting movements. "It's not. It rewards strength, control. Those who hesitate lose." I nodded slowly. "There's more to life than winning," I said gently. "Relationships matter. Kindness matters." He tilted his head, studying me. "That's what you always believed," he said. "It didn't get you very far." The comment landed harder than I expected. I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it again. Across the table, the maid froze for half a second before resuming her work, her knuckles white around the serving spoon. "I did the best I could," I said finally. "I know," he replied. "And that's the problem." Silence settled over the table, thick and uncomfortable. He didn't look angry. If anything, he looked calm. Too calm. "You taught me a lot," he continued. "You taught me what happens when you let emotions guide you. When you prioritize comfort over progress." "That's not fair," I said, my voice trembling despite my effort to keep it steady. "I taught you to care about people." He laughed softly, not cruelly, but dismissively. "Caring makes you predictable," he said. "Predictability is weakness." Something inside me shifted then, a quiet realization settling in. This wasn't a dinner meant to reconnect. It was a demonstration. The maid returned with another dish, her movements almost mechanical now. As she leaned over to place it in front of me, she whispered so quietly I barely heard her. "Please," she said, "be careful." I looked up at her, but she had already stepped away, her face carefully blank. My son noticed nothing, or pretended not to. "You see," he said, following my gaze. "Everything runs smoothly when people know their place." The word sent a chill down my spine. "What do you mean by that?" I asked. He shrugged. "Everyone has a role. When they perform it well, life is efficient." "Peaceful? Peaceful for whom?" I asked. "For those in charge," he replied, as if stating the obvious. I set my fork down, my appetite gone. "This isn't the way you were raised." "No," he agreed. "It's better." His eyes held mine unblinking. For the first time, I saw something beneath the surface calm. Resentment, long-standing, carefully nurtured resentment. "You disappeared," I said softly. "You shut me out. I spent 2 years wondering what I did wrong." "You did nothing wrong," he said. "You did exactly what you always did." "And that was?" I asked. "You underestimated me," he said. "You tried to soften me when I needed to harden." The room felt suddenly smaller. I glanced toward the maid, who stood rigid near the kitchen entrance, her eyes fixed on the floor. "You invited me here to say this?" I asked. "I invited you here," he said, "to show you who I am now." A knock of silverware against the plate echoed loudly as my hand trembled. "And the silence?" I asked. "The years without a word. I needed distance," he replied. I needed to see what I became without your influence. And, I asked. He leaned back in his chair, surveying the apartment, the table, the people in it. I became successful, he said, respected, in control. At that moment, I understood the maid's fear more clearly. It wasn't about physical danger. It was about being seen, being measured, being found wanting. He stood up abruptly. Dessert, he announced. The maid moved at once, her expression unreadable as she passed me. Our eyes met briefly. There was apology there, and something else. Gratitude, perhaps, that someone else was now sharing the weight she carried alone. As he spoke again, casually, about future plans, about expansion and influence, I realized with a sinking heart that the boy I had raised was gone. In his place sat someone who believed love was leverage and control was virtue. And I was sitting across from him, invited not to be welcomed back, but to bear witness. Dessert sat untouched on the table between us, a carefully plated creation that looked more like art than food. My son talked as if nothing had shifted, as if the words he'd spoken moments earlier hadn't cracked something open inside me. He described future investments, new properties, people who wanted his attention and people who no longer deserved it. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but there was a sharp edge beneath it, like a blade hidden under silk. I nodded at the appropriate moments, murmured responses when silence demanded it, but my attention kept drifting to the young woman standing near the kitchen. She hovered there, hands clasped tightly in front of her, eyes lowered. She didn't eat, she never sat. She waited. At one point, my son paused mid-sentence and glanced in her direction. "You can clear the table," he said. She moved instantly, stepping forward to gather the plates. When she reached for the dessert in front of me, her fingers brushed mine. It was an accident, brief and light, but she flinched as if burned. Her eyes lifted to mine for a fraction of a second. "Please," she whispered again, so softly it barely registered as sound. "Don't argue with him." My son's gaze snapped toward us. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his tone mild but expectant. "No," she said quickly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Of course not." He watched her for a moment longer than necessary, then nodded. "Good." As she carried the dishes away, I felt something settle in my chest, heavy, undeniable. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a phase. Whatever power my son had built for himself, he exercised it here freely, casually, without fear of challenge. When she returned to the room, he dismissed her with a wave of his hand. "You can go," he said. "We'll finish talking alone." Her shoulders stiffened. "Yes," she replied. She turned to leave, then hesitated. Slowly, she looked at me, her expression pleading. It was the look of someone who had already tried to warn me and failed. I watched her disappear down the hallway. The soft sound of a door closing somewhere out of sight. The apartment felt emptier without her, and at the same time, more dangerous. "You don't have to worry about her," my son said, noticing my gaze. "She's very sensitive. She's scared," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "Is she?" "Yes," I replied. "Anyone can see that." He leaned forward slightly, folding his hands together. "Fear isn't always a bad thing," he said. "It keeps people focused, motivated." "That's not motivation," I said quietly. "That's control." His lips curved into a faint smile. "You always did struggle with the difference." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Why did you really invite me here?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood and walked toward the window, looking out over the city lights below. When he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. "I wanted you to see," he said. "To understand." "Understand what?" I asked. "That I didn't become this in spite of you," he said. "I became this because of you." The words hit me like a physical blow. "That's not true," I said. "Isn't it?" he asked, turning back to face me. "You taught me discipline. You taught me sacrifice. You taught me that love is conditional, given when expectations are met, withdrawn when they're not. I never." I started, then stopped. Memories surged up unbidden. Times I'd praised him for achievements more than effort. Times I'd urged him to be strong, to push through, to not let emotions get in the way. I'd meant well. I'd wanted to prepare him for the world. "I didn't mean it that way," I said, my voice shaking. "I wanted you to be happy." "Happiness is irrelevant," he replied. "Power lasts." A laugh bubbled up in my throat, sharp and painful. "You sound like someone I don't recognize," I said. "That's because you never wanted to see this part of me," he said. "You wanted a son who made you feel good about yourself. Someone gentle. Someone grateful." "And what did you want?" I asked. "I wanted to stop feeling small," he said. The calm cracked, just for a moment. "I wanted to stop feeling like the world could hurt me and I'd have to smile through it." Silence stretched between us. In that quiet, I understood something terrible and clarifying all at once. This wasn't about revenge, it was about validation. "You didn't invite me to reconcile," I said slowly. "You invited me to approve." He smiled, genuine this time. Exactly. To tell you that this version of you is acceptable, I continued. That the way you treat people, the way you rule this place, that it's justified. And, he asked, do you? The question hung in the air, heavy with consequence. I thought of the young woman's frightened eyes, of the silence that had hollowed out my life for 2 years, of the boy who once cried when he accidentally stepped on a bug because he hated the idea of causing pain. No, I said. The word felt small, but it carried everything I had left. His expression didn't change right away. He studied me, as if recalculating. Be careful, he said. You don't understand what you're rejecting. I understand perfectly, I replied. You've built a life around fear. You call it strength because it scares you less than kindness. His jaw tightened. You're still trying to teach me, he said. I'm telling you the truth, I said, even if you don't want it. He stood very still. For a moment, I thought he might shout. Instead, he exhaled slowly and laughed under his breath. So this is it, he said. You come back after 2 years and you judge me? I didn't come to judge you, I said. I came because I love you. That's not love, he snapped. Love doesn't threaten the foundation someone's built. If the foundation requires hurting people, I said, then it deserves to be questioned. His eyes darkened. You're making a mistake, he said. You could have been part of this. Comfortable, protected. Protected from what? I asked. From being irrelevant, he said. The word stung, but it also freed something in me. I'd rather be irrelevant than complicit, I said. For the first time that night, he looked genuinely unsettled. Just for a second. Then the mask slid back into place. Then there's nothing more to discuss, he said. I stood, my legs unsteady but my resolve firm. I think you're right, I said. As I turned to leave, the door down the hallway opened quietly. The young woman stood there, her face pale. She'd heard everything. My son noticed her too. I told you to go, he said sharply. I'm sorry, she said, her voice trembling. I forgot something. She moved past him toward the kitchen, but not before our eyes met again. This time there was something new in her expression. Relief. I picked up my coat and my small forgotten gift. It felt absurdly light in my hands. At the door, I paused. If you ever decide you want help instead of approval, I said, you know how to find me. He didn't respond. The door closed behind me with a soft click. The hallway outside felt brighter, warmer, safer. As I walked toward the elevator, my heart ached with a grief deeper than the silence had ever caused. I hadn't lost my son that night. I'd finally seen him. The elevator ride down felt unreal, like my body was moving while my mind lagged behind, still sitting at that immaculate table, still hearing my son's voice stripped of warmth and memory. The doors closed with a soft metallic sigh, and only then did I realize my hands were shaking. I pressed them together, feeling the tremor run through my fingers, and let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. When the elevator opened into the lobby, the air felt different, warmer, less controlled. A couple walked past me, laughing quietly, their normalcy almost jarring. I stepped outside into the night, the city humming around me, alive and indifferent. Cars passed. Someone argued into a phone. Somewhere music drifted from an open window. Life uninterrupted. I sat in my car for a long time before turning the key. I expected to cry immediately. Instead, there was a strange stillness inside me, like the quiet after a storm passes but before you step outside to see the damage. My chest hurt, but it wasn't sharp. It was heavy, settled, as if something long carried had finally found its true weight. The drive home blurred. Traffic lights changed. Streets unfolded and disappeared behind me. I replayed the evening in fragments. The maid's warning, my son's calm certainty, the way he'd looked at me when I said no. Not angry. Not heartbroken. Just disappointed. As if I'd failed a test he'd designed. When I reached my house, the porch light was still on. I realized I'd left it that way out of habit, the same way I used to when my son lived here. I paused at the door, hand on the knob, struck by the absurd hope that somehow, by leaving that light on, I'd been inviting him back all along. Inside, the house was quiet but familiar. Comfortable. It smelled faintly of laundry detergent and the candle I'd burned earlier that evening, trying to calm my nerves before leaving. I set my coat down and placed the unopened gift on the table. For a moment, I stared at it, then laughed softly. Not bitterly, just tired. That night, sleep came in short stretches. I dreamed of my son as a child, running toward me with his arms open, then watched as the image shifted, his face hardening, his eyes turning away. Each time I woke, the same thought greeted me: I did the right thing. It didn't make the pain disappear, but it anchored me. In the days that followed, the weight of what had happened began to settle in quieter ways. I found myself replaying moments from his childhood, not to search for blame this time, but to understand. I saw how often I'd praised outcomes instead of effort. How often I'd urged him to be strong when he was scared. How rarely I'd said it's okay to be soft. Guilt crept in, but it didn't consume me the way it once might have. Parenting is an imperfect art. You do your best with the tools you have, shaped by the world you grew up in. I couldn't rewrite the past. I could only choose what to do now. I didn't hear from him after that night. No message, no call. And this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't a punishment or a mystery. It was a boundary, one he had drawn, and one I had finally respected. What surprised me most was the sense of peace that began to grow alongside the grief. I woke up without checking my phone first thing in the morning. I went days without rehearsing imaginary conversations in my head. I stopped bracing myself for rejection that never came. One afternoon, about a week later, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was simple, "Thank you." My heart skipped as I opened it. It was from the young woman. She didn't say how she'd gotten my email. She didn't need to. The message was brief, written carefully, as if every word had been weighed before being placed. She thanked me for saying what I did, for not pretending, for leaving. She said that seeing someone stand up to him calmly, without fear or cruelty, had reminded her that the world was bigger than that apartment, that not all power was loud or sharp. She said she was leaving her job. I stared at the screen for a long time after reading it. Then I replied, equally carefully. I told her she didn't owe me thanks. I told her I hoped she found safety, kindness, and a place where she didn't have to whisper. Before sending it, I hesitated, then added one more line: "You deserve better." I don't know if she ever read it, but sending it felt important. As weeks turned into months, people noticed a change in me. Friends commented that I seemed lighter, even when I spoke honestly about the pain. I stopped defending my son when others asked about him. I didn't attack him either. I simply said, "We're not in each other's lives right now," and that was enough. Some nights were still hard. There were moments when I saw something he would have loved. A book, a joke, a memory, and felt the familiar ache. On those nights, I let myself grieve the child I'd raised, not the man he had become. There is a difference, and learning it saved me. I learned something else too: love doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes it means walking away before you start lying to yourself. Sometimes it means refusing to applaud cruelty just because it wears a familiar face. I kept the porch light on for a while longer, not for him, exactly, but for the part of myself that needed reassurance. Eventually one evening, I turned it off, not out of bitterness, but acceptance. If he ever wanted to come back, he knew where I lived. The door wasn't locked, but I wasn't standing vigil anymore. I don't know what my son is doing now. I don't know if he ever questioned the life he built or the control he prized so highly. That's his journey, not mine. I can hope quietly from a distance. What I do know is this: walking away that night didn't mean I failed as a parent. It meant I finally honored what I'd tried to teach him once. That how you treat people matters, even when no one is watching, even when you have the power not to care. I lost the illusion of who my son was, but I gained something I didn't expect: myself.